To stand up straight is also to accept responsibility. Because the moment you face the world directly, you invite risk. You expose yourself to failure, to judgment, to suffering. But Peterson insists that meaning is found precisely in that burden. Responsibility is the antidote to chaos. When you lift your own weight, you transform your suffering into purpose. Every act of strength begins with the decision to stop collapsing inward. This is why Peterson so often connects posture to moral courage. The person who stands upright is the one who dares to bear the load of being, who chooses to confront difficulty rather than hide from it. In a world addicted to comfort, the smallest act of courage begins with a single movement, straightening your spine. The modern world tempts us to shrink. Zamund. We hide behind screens, behind irony, behind excuses. We apologize for existing before anyone even asks us to. But every time we do, we tell the world and ourselves that we are weak. And when you believe you're weak long enough, resentment grows. Peterson warns that this resentment is dangerous. It leads to envy, bitterness, and hatred toward those who appear stronger. You stop standing altogether. You sink into victimhood. That path, he says, is psychological hell. Not because life is cruel, but because surrendering to weakness makes life unbearable. But the alternative is rebirth. Standing up straight is not aggression, it's transformation. It's the quiet realization that you are capable of more than fear allows. It's the student who raises their hand when they'd rather stay invisible. It's the man who decides to get out of bed when grief says not to. It's the person who, after countless defeats, still faces the world and says, I will try again. Posture, in Peterson's view, isn't just about shoulders. It's about the soul. You don't wait to feel confident. You act as if you are. And through that action, confidence grows. It's feedback. Hodi, a dialogue between the body and the mind. The more you rise, the more capable you feel, and the world responds in kind. Standing up straight is not pretending that life is easy. It's admitting that it isn't, and facing it anyway. It's defiance against despair. It's saying, chaos, I see you, and I'm ready. That simple gesture is how order begins. It's how people rebuild their dignity one movement at a time. Peterson reminds us that responsibility gives meaning to suffering. That to carry your own weight is to discover your own strength. When you stand tall, you don't just change how others see you, you change how you see yourself. And that change ripples outward. Respect replaces resentment. Action replaces paralysis. Courage replaces fear. The lobster, then, is more than a metaphor. It's a reminder of what life demands from all of us. To rise, to compete, to claim our place in the hierarchy of being, not through cruelty, but through competence and courage. When you slouch, you tell your biology, I am prey. When you stand tall, you tell the universe, I am a participant. So start there, straighten your back, lift your head, face the world, even when it feels unbearable. Because the first victory in life isn't a job, a title, or approval. It's posture. And the first act of courage is to stand up straight with your shoulders back. Rule 2, treat yourself like someone you are responsible for helping. We take care of our pets. We refill their bowls, take them to the vet, give them medicine even when they fight against it. We do what's necessary, not what's easy, because we love them, because we feel responsible for them. And yet, when it comes to ourselves, we often refuse to do the same. We skip the medicine we need. We ignore the advice we'd give anyone else. We abandon our potential with excuses we wouldn't accept from a stranger. Jordan Peterson's second rule begins with this question: why do we treat others better than we treat ourselves? Peterson noticed something strange. When doctors prescribe life-saving medication, studies show that many people never take it, or they stop halfway through. But if that same person is told to give the medicine to their dog, they almost always do it. Why? Because people care deeply for others. But they often believe they are unworthy of the same care. It's not laziness, it's not ignorance, it's something more tragic, a quiet self-contempt. Deep down, many people feel that they don't deserve help, that they failed too much or fallen too far to be worth saving. But Peterson argues that this is not humility, it's betrayal. Because the same life you neglect is the one you are morally bound to protect. You are not your enemy. You are someone under your care. Think of someone you love, a child, a sibling, a friend. If they were sick, you'd do everything to help them heal. If they made a mistake, you'd guide them back, not condemn them. You'd show compassion, patience, and structure. Peterson says you have a moral obligation to treat yourself like someone you are responsible for helping. It's not self-indulgence, it's discipline, it's respect for the potential within you, the same potential you'd fight for in someone else. Many people live divided within themselves. One part wants to grow, the other wants to avoid effort. One part speaks with hope, the other whispers doubt. 2. You become your own battlefield, the caretaker and the saboteur. Peterson insists that healing begins when those parts start talking honestly. When the part that punishes learns to forgive. When the part that fears failure learns to act anyway. Because self-discipline without self-compassion becomes tyranny, and self-compassion without discipline becomes decay. You need both, mercy and strength, held in balance. Peterson's rule asks us to look at ourselves as something fragile, sacred, and unfinished, like a soul in your care. You are not a tool to exploit. You are a being to nurture. You are the caretaker of your own future. The small habits that shape your day, sleep, food, honesty, routine, are not trivial. They are how you show the universe that you value your existence. When you neglect yourself, you tell the world your life doesn't matter. When you care for yourself, even quietly, you tell the world it does. Peterson connects this to something deeply ancient, the biblical story of creation. In Genesis, the human being is made in the image of God. To him, that means each individual carries within them something divine, a spark of potential that deserves respect. So when you treat yourself carelessly, when you sabotage your own progress, you are desecrating something sacred. You're harming the potential that could change not only your life, but the lives of others. To care for yourself is not selfish. It's preparation for responsibility. You cannot lift the world if you cannot stand on your own feet. Imagine you are caring for a person you truly love, someone whose life depends on your decisions. You'd ensure they eat right. You'd encourage them to study, to move, to rest, to try again when they fail. You'd see them not as they are now, but as they could become. That's how you must treat yourself, as someone worth improving. Because potential is fragile, it disappears when ignored. And the tragedy of life is not the suffering it brings, it's the potential we abandon by refusing to care. Peterson says that self-care isn't about comfort, it's about responsibility. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to demand more, to set standards, to say a no to distraction and yes to growth. He writes, you must determine where you are going so that you can bargain for yourself so that you don't end up resentful, vengeful, and cruel. When you stop acting like your own advocate, you become your own oppressor. You begin to hate the person you could have been. Caring for yourself then becomes an act of moral courage because it forces you to confront what's broken and to repair it piece by piece. You are both the sculptor and the clay, and every decision, every small act of responsibility shapes the person you become. Maybe you can't fix everything today, but you can start by doing one thing that makes life slightly less chaotic. Clean the room, cook a meal, write one honest paragraph. It's not about grand change. It's about showing yourself that you are worth the effort. Every time you do, the world responds. Your mind clears. Your environment stabilizes. Your sense of meaning deepens. And slowly, chaos recedes. Peterson often says that meaning is born from responsibility. That the person who takes care of themselves gains the strength to take care of others. And that the person who does neither invites bitterness into the world, because neglect spreads. But so does care. One kind act to yourself ripples outward into families, friendships, communities. You become a source of stability in a world desperate for it. When you treat yourself like someone you are responsible for helping, you stop being your enemy. You stop asking, what's wrong with me? And start asking, what can I do to make this better? That question changes everything. It replaces self-hatred with accountability. It turns guilt into direction. It reminds you that you are not here to suffer needlessly. You are here to take care of what has been entrusted to you, your mind, your body, your life. So take the medicine, rest when you need to. Plan for your future like someone's survival depends on it, because it does. Your life is not a burden to be endured. It's a responsibility to be embraced. The same compassion you show to others must be extended inward. Because until you learn to care for yourself, you will never fully care for anyone else. Treat yourself like someone you are responsible for helping, not because you are fragile, but because you are valuable. And when you begin to live that truth, the world around you slowly begins to heal. Rule 3: make friends with people who want the best for you. Imagine the kind of friend who celebrates your victories like they were their own, who pushes you to rise higher when it would be easier to stay still, who tells you the truth not because it's comfortable, but because it's right. Now imagine the opposite, the friend who drags you down with every conversation, who mocks your ambition, who finds comfort in your failure because it makes their own life seem less small. Jordan Peterson's third rule is simple but profound. Make friends with people who want the best for you, because the people you surround yourself with shape the direction of your life. Peterson tells the story of a small Canadian town he grew up in, a place full of lost potential. Talented kids with bright futures slowly sinking into addiction, resentment, and stagnation. He saw people who could have built beautiful lives, but instead stayed trapped among others who refused to change. When someone tried to improve, to break away, to become more, the group mocked them, pulled them back, or treated their progress as betrayal. Peterson realized something painful. Not everyone who smiles at you wants you to succeed. Some people don't want to see you rise because it reminds them that they've chosen to fall. And if you're not careful, their gravity becomes your prison. We like to think friendship is unconditional. That loyalty means staying no matter what. But Peterson reminds us that true loyalty must be rooted in mutual growth. You should be surrounded by people who would rather see you strong than comfortable, who take joy in your progress even when it surpasses theirs. Because friendship is not about sameness, it's about shared purpose. The right people won't let you destroy yourself quietly. They'll stop you when you lie, when you drift, when you settle for less than you can be. And when you fall, they'll help you rise. Not out of pity, but out of respect. But there's a reason this rule is difficult. Sometimes the people holding us back are the ones we love most. We try to save them. We tell ourselves, if I just stay a little longer, if I just give a little more, they'll change. But Peterson warns that this rarely works. You cannot lift someone who refuses to stand. And in trying to carry them, you may sink with them. That doesn't mean abandoning compassion. It means understanding boundaries. Helping someone doesn't mean joining them in the hole. It means showing them the way out. You can offer a hand, but they must take it. If they don't, you must keep walking. Because your life, too, is sacred, and your potential deserves protection. Peterson says that some people aren't looking for growth. They're looking for victims to share their misery. They prefer sympathy to self-improvement. They want company in failure, not direction towards success. He calls them false friends, people who appear loyal but secretly root for your weakness. When you try to change, they tell you you've changed too much. When you chase ambition, they call you arrogant. When you succeed, they find reasons to dismiss it. They don't see your growth as inspiration, they see it as judgment. Because every step you take toward your potential reminds them of their refusal to take their own. And the painful truth, Peterson says, is that you cannot build your future while chained to someone who refuses to face theirs. So what makes a true friend? A true friend wants your best future, not your present comfort. They tell you when you're wrong, not to shame you, but to help you grow. They celebrate your success, not because it flatters them, but because it's good. And when life breaks you, as it inevitably will, they don't enable your self-destruction. They hold you accountable to your higher self. Peterson calls this a reciprocal friendship, a friendship that's based on shared responsibility, not mutual weakness. It's not always easy. In fact, true friendship often demands confrontation. Sometimes love means having a difficult conversation. Sometimes care means saying, stop. You're hurting yourself. The world tells us to accept people they are, but Peterson reminds us that's incomplete. We must also encourage people to become who they could be, because acceptance without aspiration is not love, it's resignation. Peterson's advice can sound harsh. Walk away from people who choose destruction. But it's not cruelty, it's honesty. You cannot fix people who don't want to change. Every person has to face their own chaos. And the best thing you can do for them is to face yours. Your example may inspire them more than your pity ever could. If you want to know who your true friends are, watch what happens when you start to grow. The ones who cheer for you, who push you, who help you stay disciplined when you lose focus. Those are the keepers. The ones who mock, sabotage, or guilt you for improving. those are not. And the hardest part, sometimes you'll have to let them go. You'll grieve it, but you'll breathe easier too. Because life is too short to carry those who have no intention of walking beside you. The company you keep shapes your destiny. You become like the people you spend your time with. Slowly, subtly, inevitably. Peterson puts it simply, if you surround yourself with people who support your upward aim, they will not tolerate your cynicism and destruction. They will instead encourage you when you do good for yourself and others. That's the test. Do your friends tolerate your self-destruction, or do they call you back to your best self? Because every day, consciously or not, the people around you are teaching you how to live or how to decay. Choose people who tell you the truth, who lift their eyes towards something higher and want you there too, who find joy in your progress even when it casts a shadow over theirs. And just as importantly, be that friend for others. Encourage them to aim upward. Refuse to let envy poison your heart. Celebrate their light because their victory doesn't diminish you. It expands what's possible for everyone. Surround yourself with people who want the best for you, and you'll find that life itself begins to want the best for you too. Rule 4, compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to who someone else is today. Every morning, millions of people wake up and open a window into the lives of others. A screen filled with flawless faces, beautiful homes, achievements, laughter, and success. It's a global scoreboard, but one where the rules are invisible and the game never ends. You scroll, you compare, you shrink, and quietly you start to believe that you're losing. Jordan Peterson's 4th rule is an antidote to this invisible poison. Compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to who someone else is today. Because the comparison that matters isn't outward, it's inward. Peterson explains that life is not a competition against strangers. It's a dialogue with your own potential. Every person walks a path shaped by their own pain, privilege, and struggle. When you measure yourself against others, you ignore all the hidden variables that make their journey different from yours. You see their highlight reel, not their behind the scenes. You see the castle, not the years of mud. He writes that comparing yourself to others is a trap, one that breeds resentment, envy, and despair. It blinds you to your own progress, and it paralyzes the will to act. Because why try when someone is already ahead? Why build when someone else's tower already touches the sky? But what if the point isn't to win the race? What if it's to run your own course with honesty and consistency? Peterson believes that meaning is found not in victory, but in improvement. That the self is not a fixed identity, but a process, something you negotiate with daily. Yesterday you were one version of yourself. Today you have the chance to be slightly better, stronger, wiser, kinder, more disciplined. That's progress. And progress, not perfection, is the measure of a meaningful life. He writes, no matter how good someone else is at something, you can always find someone who's better. So instead of comparing yourself with others, compare yourself to who you were yesterday. That small shift in focus transforms envy into energy. Peterson once described how his patients often came to him overwhelmed by failure, by stagnation, by a feeling of never being enough. They were chasing impossible standards set by invisible judges. He'd ask them, what small thing could you do today that would make tomorrow slightly better? Because improvement, he says, doesn't come from grand transformations. It comes from small victories accumulated over time. One better habit, one kinder conversation, one task completed that you used to avoid. You can't fix everything at once, but you can make one corner of your life slightly less chaotic. And then, piece by piece, chaos turns to order. Peterson's idea isn't new. It echoes ancient wisdom. In the Taoist tradition, the path or Tao represents a personal journey of balance and progress. In Christianity, sanctification is gradual, step by step, day by day. In psychology, incremental improvement builds confidence and rewires the brain. Across time and cultures, the message is the same. Compare yourself not with others, but with your own past self. Because that's the only comparison that's fair and the only one that leads forward. The danger of comparing yourself to others is that it feeds resentment, and resentment corrodes the soul. When you constantly look upward at those ahead, you start to hate them for being there. But that hatred is misdirected. It's not really about them. It's about the pain of ignoring your own potential. Peterson warns that resentment often masks cowardice. It's easier to envy than to act, easier to criticize than to climb. But resentment doesn't just poison your mind, it blinds you to gratitude. Because in the shadow of someone else's success, you forget what's good in your own life, and what you don't appreciate, you lose. He challenges us to begin somewhere small, brutally realistic but honest. Ask yourself, what am I avoiding? What could I improve, even slightly? Maybe your life is a mess. Fine. Then clean one shelf, fix one habit, speak one truth you've been avoiding. Don't compare your chaotic starting point to someone else's polished result. Just begin. Because comparison paralyzes, action liberates. Peterson explains that life is too complex to be judged by simple rankings. Every person has strengths and weaknesses, a mosaic of wins and losses that can't be measured on a single scale. You might envy someone's career, but not their loneliness. You might admire their talent, but not their trauma. Everyone pays for their gifts in unseen ways. When you accept that, compassion replaces jealousy, and you stop wasting energy on battles that were never yours to fight. The real competition, Peterson says, is against who you were yesterday. Were you more disciplined today? Hey, did you avoid one lie you might have told before? Did you face one fear you used to run from? Did you take one small step toward the person you want to become? If yes, then you are winning, not against others, but against the version of yourself that wanted to stay small. Yeah. That's the only kind of victory that lasts. In the modern world, comparison has become currency. Likes, followers, status, appearance all create an illusion of worth. But meaning, Peterson reminds us, isn't found in numbers, it's found in progress. When you focus on becoming just 1% better every day, your life compounds in ways no comparison ever could. A small act of discipline leads to a cleaner room. A cleaner room builds confidence. Confidence leads to bigger goals, and bigger goals reshape your entire existence. You become the proof of your own potential. Peterson writes that life is not a straight climb, it's a spiral. You circle upward, revisiting old challenges at higher levels of understanding. That's why progress feels slow, but it's real. And when you measure yourself honestly, you realize how far you've come. Because self-awareness turns struggle into meaning, and meaning is what makes life worth living. Stop keeping score against the world. Keep score against yourself. Gently, honestly, daily, honestly, daily. The world doesn't need a perfect you. It needs a better you. And a better you begins when you stop asking, why am I not them? And start asking, how can I be more like who I could be? The competition is not with others. It's with your own potential. Me. And the only prize worth winning is becoming the person you were meant to be. Rule 5, do not let your children do anything that makes you dislike them. Children are not born civilized. They are small, impulsive, emotional beings, pure potential wrapped in chaos. They cry for what they want, test every boundary, and push every limit. And that's not a flaw. It's nature trying to find the edges of the world. Jordan Peterson begins this rule with a truth that's uncomfortable to hear. If you don't teach your children to behave properly, the world will teach them, and the world is far less forgiving. Parenting, he says, is not about control. It's about guidance, about transforming a wild, self-centered creature into a person who can function with love, responsibility, and respect. When Peterson worked as a clinical psychologist, he often saw parents who were afraid to discipline their children. They wanted to be kind, to be friends. They feared saying no would make them harsh or unloving or authoritarian, but what he saw instead was tragedy. Children without boundaries don't grow freer. They grow lost. Without structure, they become anxious and defiant. They push harder not because they're bad, but because they're desperate to find where the limits are. And when the limits never come, they grow into adults who don't understand consequence and who suffer endlessly because of it. Peterson explains that good behavior isn't learned automatically. It's taught through patient correction and consistent feedback. When a child hits, leaves, or disrespects others, and the parent does nothing, the child learns a silent lesson. The world revolves around me, but the world does not. And when reality finally corrects that illusion, through rejection, punishment, or failure, it's far harsher than any lesson a loving parent could have given early on. He writes, if a child has not been taught to behave properly by the age of 4, it will be very difficult for him ever to learn. It's a warning not of cruelty but of consequence, because children who never learn limits become adults who can't bear them. There's a difficult truth in this rule. Every parent shapes the kind of person their child will become, not just through love, but through discipline. Peterson argues that children need rules the same way plants need stakes to grow straight to find light. Without structure, their energy collapses in every direction. He says, parents who refuse to correct their children because they want to be liked are sacrificing the future for the present. And in the end, that sacrifice hurts everyone, because a child who is never disciplined becomes the kind of person that even their own parents can't stand to be around. Discipline doesn't mean anger or violence. It means teaching that actions have consequences, that behavior shapes reality. When a child learns that tantrums bring results, they will keep throwing them. But when they learn that respect and patience bring better rewards, they begin to mature. Peterson encourages parents to remember that discipline is a form of love because it prepares children for a world that will not bend for them. A parent who refuses to correct a child out of fear or guilt is not being kind. They're leaving the child unprepared for life. Boundaries protect not just others from the child, but the child from themselves. Peterson connects this rule to something larger, the balance between order and chaos that governs all human life. Children are born in chaos. Parents are the architects of order. If parents abandon that role, chaos wins. He describes parenting as a moral responsibility, not to control but to cultivate, to shape the child's instincts, not crush them, to turn curiosity into wisdom, energy into purpose, desire into empathy. It's an art of transformation, and it begins with small corrections. Own hit, a say thank you, a tell the truth, a clean up after yourself. Each act may seem small, but together they build the foundation of civilization. Peterson tells parents, don't let your children do anything that makes you dislike them. At first, it sounds harsh, but what he means is this. If you silently resent your child's behavior, you'll eventually act it out in anger. You'll snap, withdraw, or shame them, not because they're bad, but because you failed to guide them early. It's not fair to the child, or to you. By correcting them when they're young, you prevent resentment later. You teach them how to exist peacefully with others. You teach them how to be loved and how to love in return. Because no one enjoys being around a child who is rude, cruel, or manipulative. And if the world dislikes your child, it will punish them for it. Your job as a parent is to make sure that doesn't happen. Peterson often returns to the idea that every family is a small world, a microcosm of society. When children learn to behave properly at home, they carry that order into the larger world. When they don't, chaos spreads outward. Parenting then isn't just personal, it's a moral act that affects everyone. He says, parents are proxies for the broader world. When you reward honesty, you teach your child that truth leads to trust. When you reward kindness, you teach them that empathy creates connection. And when you punish cruelty, you teach them that the world has moral structure. That structure is what keeps civilization alive. A child is not meant to be perfect, only teachable. Their rebellion is part of the learning process. Your role isn't to crush it, but to shape it, to show them how to use their strength wisely. Parenting is not about producing obedience. It's about cultivating character. And character, Peterson reminds us, is built through correction, not avoidance. Children thrive when they know where the edges are. They feel safe inside boundaries, just as adults feel safe inside laws. Freedom, paradoxically, is born from order. Peterson's advice at its heart is simple but powerful. Love your children deeply, play with them, listen to them, laugh with them, but also teach them to act in ways that make life livable for themselves and for others. Because discipline is not the enemy of love. It is love expressed through responsibility. And if you teach your children well, if you guide them to be kind, honest, and respectful, they will become the kind of people you are proud to call your own. The kind of people who make the world slightly less chaotic, slightly more humane. That, Peterson says, is a legacy worth leaving. Rule 6, set your house in perfect order before you criticize the world. The world is full of injustice, war, corruption, inequality, suffering. It's easy to look around and feel disgust, even despair. To believe that life itself is unfair, that existence is rigged against the good. Many people reach a point where that anger becomes unbearable. They lash out, they protest, they blame, they tear down institutions, or curse the universe for being cruel. But Jordan Peterson's sixth rule offers a harder, quieter challenge. Set your house in perfect order before you criticize the world. Because before you try to fix everything outside you, you must face what's broken with. Peterson begins with a brutal truth. That much of human suffering is not random. It's compounded by our own neglect, our own resentment, our own refusal to take responsibility. We rage against the chaos of the world while our own lives fall apart in silence. We demand justice but ignore the injustice in our own homes. We preach morality but avoid our own hidden corruption. Peterson asks, have you cleaned your room? Have you put your own soul in order? Because if you haven't, your criticism of the world is built on sand. He points to people throughout history who became consumed by resentment, people who saw evil in everything except themselves, who sought to remake society but refused to face their own flaws. And every time, it ended in tragedy. Because when resentment replaces responsibility, destruction follows. Peterson writes, when the world becomes too much to bear, you must start small. Put your own life in order before you attempt to change others. It's not about ignoring injustice. It's about gaining the moral authority to confront it. Imagine a man furious at the corruption of his government, but cruel to his family. A woman who condemns greed, but lives in bitterness and envy. A student who speaks of changing the system, but can't keep their own promises. Peterson argues that this hypocrisy, the distance between our ideals and our personal actions, is where much of human misery lives. Before you demand the world be honest with yourself. Before you fix the world's corruption, confront the deceit in your own life. Before you accuse society of cruelty, ask how you treat the people closest to you. Because moral reform begins not in governments or protests. It begins in individual souls. Peterson often references the story of Cain and Abel, the first story of resentment in human history. Two brothers make sacrifices to God. Abel's is accepted, Cain's is not. Instead of improving his own offering, Cain blames the world and kills his brother. It's the oldest human pattern. When we refuse to improve ourselves, we seek to destroy those who remind us of what we could be. Peterson calls this the spirit of Cain, the voice that says, it's not my fault. The world is corrupt. I've been wronged. But that voice left unchallenged becomes malevolence. It turns pain into hatred into evil. Peterson saw this pattern in his clinical work. People whose lives had collapsed under the weight of tragedy, addiction, betrayal. They'd come into his office asking, why me? Why is life so cruel? And his answer was never simplistic. He didn't deny their pain. He didn't tell them the world was fair. He told them to start where they had control, however small that space was. Clean your room. Tell the truth. Stop saying things that make you weak. Stop doing things you know are wrong. That's where transformation begins, because the smallest act of order pushes back against chaos. Peterson isn't preaching moral perfection. He knows life is suffering, that pain, loss, and injustice are inevitable. But he insists that before you curse the world, you must earn the right to do so by taking responsibility for your own domain, your habits, your words, your duties. You become the kind of person who can speak truth without hypocrisy. When your own life is in order, your criticism of the world becomes powerful. When it isn't, your criticism becomes noise. He writes, don't blame capitalism, the left, the right, or fate before you have examined your own life. Because the problem is rarely only out there. It's also in here. In our pride, laziness, envy, and self-deception. Setting your house in order is not easy. It's painful. It means confronting years of mistakes, forgiving yourself, repairing relationships, cleaning up the messes you've avoided. It means letting go of excuses that have defined you. But there's beauty in that process, because as you put your house in order, the world begins to make sense again. Peterson connects this rule to meaning itself. Meaning, he says, is found in responsibility, in voluntarily bearing the weight of your own existence. When you do that, you transform suffering into purpose. You can't stop tragedy. You can't prevent the chaos of life. But you can build a foundation strong enough to stand on when it comes. And that foundation is your personal order. A clean room may seem trivial, but it's a symbolic victory, a declaration that you are not surrendering to despair, that you will face the storm with discipline, not resentment. This rule isn't just about cleanliness or chores. It's about spiritual architecture. It's about building a soul strong enough to confront reality as it is, not as you wish it to be. The smallest act of order is a prayer against the darkness. It says, "The world may be broken, but I won't add to its chaos." Because once your house is in order, you start to see that many of the problems you blame the world for were reflections of your own. And that realization is both humbling and liberating. Peterson doesn't deny that evil exists outside of us. That systems fail. That injustice is real. But he warns against the arrogance of assuming that we would do better if given the power. History, he says, proves otherwise. Ordinary people become monsters when they focus on changing the world before changing themselves. He writes, "Who dares to say that if they had the same circumstances as history's tyrants, they would have acted differently?" That humility, that understanding of our own potential for good and evil, is what keeps our criticism honest. So before you rage at the corruption of the world, ask, have I told the truth today? Have I fulfilled my obligations? Have I cleaned the corner of the world that's mine to care for? Because when enough people do that, the world itself changes. Order spreads outward, one life at a time. Revolutions built on resentment destroy, but revolutions built on responsibility endure. The rule is not a command to stay silent, it's an invitation to speak from integrity. Criticism born from bitterness leads to chaos. Criticism born from responsibility leads to reform. You can't fix the world if your own soul is in disarray, but when you put your life in order, the world listens when you speak, and that's how real change begins. Not with condemnation, but with correction. Not with blame, but with responsibility. Because when you set your house in perfect order, you become the kind of person the world needs most. Someone who leads by example, not resentment. Rule 7, pursue what is meaningful, not what is expedient. Every day, we're tempted by the same quiet voice, the one that says, take the shortcut. Avoid the pain. Choose the easy way. It whispers when you lie instead of tell the truth. When you chase pleasure instead of purpose. When you take what you want now and promise yourself you'll do better later. That's expedience, the pursuit of what's convenient, comfortable, and immediate. But Jordan Peterson's 7th rule argues that expedience is the path of decay, and the only alternative, the only thing that truly sustains life, is meaning. Pursue what is meaningful, not what is expedient. Peterson begins with an ancient story, one as old as humanity itself, the story of sacrifice. Thousands of years ago, humans discovered something profound. They learned that if you delay gratification, if you give up something valuable now, you can create a better future. They gave the best of their harvest, their time, even their comfort to something greater. They learned that life is not about the next meal or the next thrill, but about building something that lasts. That was the birth of meaning, the idea that the future could be improved through present sacrifice. Modern life, Peterson says, has forgotten this lesson. We've replaced meaning with convenience. We trade long-term fulfillment for short-term pleasure. Our principles for approval, our discipline for distraction, our integrity for comfort. But the more we chase ease, the more life empties out, because ease is not purpose, it's anesthesia. Peterson draws a sharp line between the expedient and the meaningful. Expedience asks, what's easiest right now? Meaning asks, what's right no matter how difficult? Expedience is lying to avoid conflict. Meaning is telling the truth, even when it costs you. Expedience is indulgence. Meaning is responsibility. Expedience is pleasure today. Meaning is peace tomorrow. One gives comfort, the other gives character. Peterson believes that the search for meaning begins when we face suffering honestly. Because suffering, he says, is the price of being alive. No one escapes it. But when suffering is aimed towards something meaningful, it transforms into strength. He writes, meaning is what sustains you when everything else falls apart. Meaning gives you a reason to get up after failure, to care when no one's watching, to keep going when there's no guarantee of reward. Without meaning, suffering becomes unbearable. With meaning, suffering becomes sacrifice. Peterson often tells his students, you must place something of ultimate value at the center of your life. Because when everything collapses, when pleasure fades, when success fails, only meaning can hold you together. That meaning doesn't come from comfort or entertainment. It comes from responsibility, from doing what you must do even when it's hard. He says the purpose of life is not happiness. It's to find the deepest burden that you can bear and to bear it. That's the paradox. True fulfillment comes not from ease, but from carrying something heavy, willingly. Think about what happens when you act only for pleasure. The drink feels good until the hangover. The lie feels safe until the truth returns. The distraction feels comforting until time runs out. Every expedient act borrows from the future, and the debt always comes due. But when you act for meaning, you invest in something that compounds. Integrity, trust, love, growth. You suffer today, but you build tomorrow. You sacrifice now, but you rise stronger later. That's the timeless formula of human progress. Peterson often uses the biblical story of Cain and Abel to illustrate the difference. Abel offers his best to God, his work, his devotion, his sincerity. Cain offers what's convenient, a half-hearted sacrifice. When his offering is rejected, Cain becomes resentful and kills his brother. It's the eternal story of envy and expedience, choosing bitterness over betterment, convenience over courage. Peterson warns that resentment is born from the refusal to sacrifice properly. When you avoid responsibility, you blame the world. When you accept it, you transform it. Meaning, Peterson explains, isn't found. It's created through disciplined action. Through telling the truth even when it's painful, through facing chaos instead of running from it, through building something that matters, a family, a career, a soul. Every act of responsibility expands order against the chaos of life. That's how you find meaning, by voluntarily facing the things that terrify you and improving what you can. He says that the person who pursues what is meaningful builds resilience, because meaning protects you from despair. When you know why you're suffering, you can endure almost any how. That's why Peterson often quotes Nietzsche. He who has a why to live can bear almost any how. Meaning turns chaos into direction. It turns tragedy into strength. It's the antidote to nihilism, the belief that nothing matters. Because when nothing matters, anything goes. And that's when people fall into darkness. Meaning isn't always grand or dramatic. It can be found in the smallest acts. Telling the truth in a difficult conversation, showing up when it would be easier to quit, caring for someone who can't repay you, creating something beautiful simply because you can. Every act of meaning is a rebellion against chaos. A statement that your life, your choices matter. Peterson reminds us that expedience can disguise itself as kindness, pleasure, or even virtue, but it always avoids the real work of becoming whole. It chooses what's easy over what's true, and what's easy today becomes regret tomorrow. He challenges us to aim higher, to build our lives around what endures, not what distracts, to choose responsibility over impulse, purpose over pleasure, love over convenience. Because meaning is not found in the absence of suffering, it's found in the confrontation with it. The rule at its heart is simple. Do what makes life meaningful, not what makes it easy. Stand up straight, tell the truth, take responsibility, care for others, and face the future with courage. Not because it's pleasant, but because it's right. Peterson writes, a meaning trumps expedience. Meaning is the path to God. Whether or not you believe in divinity, the point stands. Meaning connects you to something beyond yourself, to truth, to others, to eternity. And in that connection, life becomes bearable, not because it's painless, but because it's purposeful. You can chase pleasure and stay empty, or you can carry your burden and find peace. You can live for today or build for forever. The choice is yours, but only one leads to meaning. Rule 8, tell the truth, or at least don't lie. Truth has always been dangerous. People have died for it. Empires have fallen because of it. And only what's real can sustain you when life becomes unbearable. He's not asking for perfection. He knows we all fail at this. Sometimes we don't even know we're lying, but his rule contains a mercy. If you can't tell the truth, at least don't lie. Even silence, when honest, is better than falsehood. Even admitting I don't know is better than pretending you do. That small refusal, to lie even for convenience, is where integrity begins. Telling the truth is a form of courage. It invites rejection, conflict, and loss. But it also attracts respect, strength, and meaning. Peterson says that the truth will set you free, but not until it's finished with you. It will strip away illusions first, about who you are, what you want, and why you suffer, but only after that destruction comes freedom. Truth-telling isn't just about words, it's about aligning your entire life with what's real. You stop pretending to like things you hate. You stop saying yes when you mean no. You stop building relationships on lies. You start acting as if what you do matters, because it does. And when you live like that, your life gains coherence. Your thoughts, words, and actions stop fighting each other. You become one person instead of fragments. That's what integrity really means. To be whole. Peterson reminds us that truth is the antidote to chaos. The moment you tell it, you create order within and around you. You become trustworthy, dependable, alive. Lies, on the other hand, make you weak because they demand more lies to protect themselves, and eventually they collapse under their own weight, taking you with them. So the choice is simple but never easy. You can live safely in lies or dangerously in truth, but only one leads to freedom. Peterson's rule ends where it began, with honesty, not the abstract honesty of philosophy, but the everyday courage to speak truth when it costs you. He says to tell the truth so that you can bring the most noble part of yourself into existence, because when you speak truth, you invite light into the world. You help others do the same. You create a reality that is painful but bearable, fragile but real, and in that reality, meaning grows. So tell the truth, even when it shakes the ground beneath you, even when it costs you comfort, approval, or peace. Because the lie feels safe for a moment, but truth builds a life you can actually live in. And in a world drowning in deception, truth is still the most revolutionary act of all. Rule 9, assume that the person you are listening to might know something you don't. We live in a world where everyone wants to speak, but few want to listen. Our conversations have become performances. We wait for our turn to talk, to defend, to win. But Jordan Peterson's 9th rule asks something radical of us, something that feels almost lost in modern life. Assume that the person you are listening to might know something you don't. It's a rule not just about communication, but about humility, growth, and the quiet art of seeing the world through another's eyes. Peterson's career as a psychologist taught him that people reveal their deepest truths only when they believe they're truly being heard. He says that real listening is not about waiting for your turn. It's about opening a space for truth to emerge. Most people don't even know what they think until they hear themselves say it out loud. The act of speaking helps them organize the chaos within. So when you listen, really listen. You're not just hearing words, you're helping someone think. That, Peterson says, is sacred work. He noticed something remarkable in his therapy session. When he stayed quiet long enough, when he didn't rush to advise or correct, his patients would keep talking, slowly uncovering what they truly meant. They'd circle around their problems, pausing, struggling, until finally the truth appeared, raw, unexpected, and real. Listening in that sense is not passive. It's an act of creation. You're co-authoring someone's understanding of themselves. Peterson writes, if you listen without agenda, people will say things that even surprise themselves. That's how transformation begins. Not through argument, but through attention. But genuine listening requires something rare, the humility to admit you might be wrong. It means surrendering the illusion of certainty, the belief that you already know enough. It means accepting that the other person's experience, no matter how different, might contain a piece of truth you've never seen. That's difficult in a culture built on opinion. We are rewarded for certainty, not curiosity. We mistake confidence for competence, volume for wisdom. But Peterson warns, if your mouth is open, you're not learning. Listening is the antidote to arrogance. And humility, he says, is the beginning of wisdom. To assume the other person might know something you don't is not to agree with them. It's to engage with them honestly. You may discover they're wrong. You may discover you are. But in that exchange, both of you grow. Because truth, Peterson reminds us, doesn't belong to one side of a conversation. It exists somewhere between two imperfect perspectives waiting to be found. When you listen deeply, you become a detective, searching for fragments of reality hidden in someone else's words. Peterson often tells the story of how his students, when arguing political or moral issues, rarely listened to each other. They debated, not to understand, but to dominate. Each side saw the other as an enemy to defeat, not a mind to explore. And yet, he noticed that when someone genuinely tried to understand, when they repeated the other's point until it was acknowledged as accurate, the tone of the conversation changed. Walls softened. Truth emerged. Truth emerged. That's the power of listening. It transforms debate into dialogue. It replaces contempt with connection. Listening well takes courage. Because if you truly listen, you risk being changed. You risk discovering that your view of the world is incomplete. That's why most people avoid it. It's easier to lecture than to learn, easier to argue than to question. But every moment you listen without ego, you grow larger because you inherit a piece of the world you didn't possess before. Peterson says, the person you are listening to could know something vital, something that might save you. That's not exaggeration. Sometimes the wisdom that changes your life hides in the words of people you least expect. He also warns that refusing to listen to others or to yourself leads to stagnation. When you assume you already know enough, you stop evolving. Your ideas harden into dogma. You begin defending yourself, not truth. And eventually, your own voice drowns out the world. Listening breaks that isolation. It keeps you connected to the living flow of knowledge, culture, and experience. Peterson sees conversation as a moral act, a way of exploring truth together. Each person brings their experience, their pain, their fragments of understanding. Through dialogue, those fragments combine into something larger than either could have reached alone. It's not about winning, it's about discovering. That's why he says the best kind of conversation is one where both people walk away changed. If you leave every discussion more certain and more angry, you're not learning, you're preaching. But if you leave slightly wiser, slightly humbled, slightly clearer, that's progress. This rule also applies inwardly. Sometimes the person you need to listen to most is the one inside you. The quiet voice of intuition, guilt, or conscience that you keep silencing. Peterson reminds us that we are often strangers to ourselves. Our emotions, dreams, and fears contain truths that logic alone can't reveal. But you can't hear them until you learn to listen, patiently, without judgment. When you start listening to that inner voice, you begin to integrate the parts of yourself that you've ignored. That's how you become whole. Listening is not weakness, it's discipline. It's the ability to quiet your ego long enough to learn from reality. It's saying, oh, maybe this person, flawed, confused, human, sees something I can't. And that humility is what allows civilizations to progress, relationships to heal, and individuals to grow. Because every person you meet knows something you don't. And if you truly listen, they might give it to you. Oh, Peterson writes, listening is paying attention to what's meaningful, not to what you want to hear. It's the difference between manipulation and wisdom, between control and understanding. He argues that deep listening can even redeem the world, one conversation at a time, because it replaces hatred with dialogue, arrogance with curiosity, and isolation with truth. The act of listening becomes a moral stance, a declaration that you value truth more than pride. So, the next time you find yourself in a debate, a disagreement, or even a quiet conversation, try this. Assume, truly assume, that the other person knows something you don't. Let them finish. Ask questions. Repeat what they said until you understand it clearly, not to surrender, but to connect. Not to agree, but to grow. Because when two people listen, they create something greater than either could alone. And in a world where everyone wants to speak, listening, honest, open, humble listening is still the most revolutionary act of all. Rule 10: be precise in your speech. Words are powerful. They build worlds, shape relationships, and define reality itself. Every truth ever spoken, every lie ever believed, every law, story, or revolution all began as words. Jordan Peterson's 10th rule sounds simple, almost obvious. Be precise in your speech. But behind those 4 words lies a profound truth, that your ability to speak clearly determines your ability to think, to act, and even to live meaningfully. Because when you speak carelessly, you blur the boundaries between what's real and what's imagined. And in that blur, chaos enters. Peterson often tells his audiences, if you cannot name your problem, you cannot solve it. And that's where precision begins, with naming. When you articulate what's wrong, you give shape to the invisible. The vague anxiety that haunts you suddenly becomes a defined obstacle you can confront. But when you refuse to define your problems, when you leave them in the fog, they grow larger, darker, and more terrifying than they really are. Because what you avoid becomes what controls you. Peterson learned this early in his career as a psychologist. Patients would come to him saying, I'm unhappy, or my life is a mess. Vague, undefined statements that left them powerless. He would ask, where exactly is the problem? When does it happen? Who's involved? What are you doing when it occurs? And as they struggled to answer, something miraculous happened. Clarity emerged. the monster in the fog took shape. It wasn't a life that was unbearable. It was one broken habit, one toxic relationship, one neglected truth. When you name it precisely, you make it manageable. Peterson often connects this to ancient wisdom, the biblical story of Genesis. In the beginning, God brings order out of chaos by speaking. He names light and darkness, land and sea. Language is the act that creates structure. When we speak precisely, we imitate that creative act. We take the swirling confusion of existence and divide it into meaning. But when we speak vaguely, when we lie, when we refuse to define, we let chaos reclaim what's ours. Precision is not about being perfect with grammar or vocabulary. It's about honesty, about saying exactly what you mean, no more and no less. When you fight with someone and say, "You always ignore me," you're not being precise. You're exaggerating to win. But if you say, "I felt ignored when you didn't answer my call," you transform blame into communication. Precision turns accusation into truth, and truth is what allows relationships to heal. Peterson warns that vague language is often a form of avoidance. People use it to hide from conflict, from pain, from responsibility. You say, "I'm fine, egg," when you're not. You say it's complicated when it isn't. It's just uncomfortable. You say a maybe later when you mean "I'm afraid." But every vague word builds a wall between you and reality. And behind that wall, problems multiply. He writes, "If you refuse to specify your problems, you will keep them. You will suffer from them, and you will become resentful." Precision, by contrast, forces you to look directly at the thing that hurts. And that's the first step toward healing. Being precise in your speech is an act of courage, because clarity invites consequence. When you say something true, you expose yourself. You risk disagreement, rejection, even failure. That's why so many people hide behind ambiguity. It feels safer to be misunderstood than to be vulnerable. But Peterson reminds us that the cost of safety is meaning. If you never say what you truly think, you'll never truly know who you are. He tells his students, "You must articulate your being. Your thoughts, your desires, your fears, they must be spoken or they remain ghosts." The mind left unspoken becomes a labyrinth. But the moment you put words to your thoughts, you begin to navigate it. You find direction, because language doesn't just describe reality, it organizes it. It turns chaos into order, confusion into strategy, emotion into understanding. Peterson often compares precision to aiming at a target. If you don't know where you're aiming, you'll miss every time. If your goal is vague, "I want to be happy, I want success," you'll wander endlessly. But if you say, "I want to improve my health by exercising 3 times a week," suddenly meaning becomes measurable. The target becomes visible. The same applies to your relationships, your work, your purpose. Define what you want precisely, and reality starts cooperating. Vagueness, however, invites chaos. It's like trying to steer a ship through fog without a compass. You move, but you never arrive. Peterson also sees language as moral architecture. Every lie, every distortion, every half-truth, no matter how small, weakens that structure, and societies built on vague language crumble under confusion. He writes, "If you speak carelessly, you will doom yourself and others, because words create culture. If people stop saying what they mean, trust dies. And when trust dies, civilization unravels." That's why tyrants manipulate language first, to distort truth and make lies sound noble. Precision, then, is not just personal discipline, it's resistance against corruption. But precision is also mercy, because it turns chaos into something you can fix. If your life feels unbearable, start by describing it accurately. Write it down. Where are you failing? What hurts most? What small step could make tomorrow slightly less miserable? It's painful at first, but the more precise you get, the less powerless you feel. Peterson says you must negotiate with reality as if it were something alive, and language is how you negotiate. The clearer your words, the clearer your world. Being precise doesn't mean being harsh. It means being honest enough to build something real. It's the foundation of meaningful relationships, competent work, and genuine thought. Precision is what separates noise from music, chaos from order, confusion from understanding. It's how we cut through the fog of existence, one word at a time. So speak carefully. Say what you mean. Define your problems clearly. Name what hurts, what you want, and what you fear, because vague words create vague lives, and precise words create worlds you can actually live in. Peterson writes, "If you speak carelessly and deceitfully, what you build will fall, and you will fall with it. Speak carefully and precisely, and what you build will endure." Every sentence is a tool, every word a choice. You can use them to hide, or to build, to wound, or to heal, to deceive, or to discover. And the more precise you are, the more real your world becomes. Be precise in your speech, because words are the first form of order, and clarity is the first step toward truth. Rule 11. Do not bother children when they are skateboarding. Boys gather on the street corner with skateboards. The air is electric with risk. Chipped concrete, scraped knees, adrenaline, and laughter. They push faster, jump higher, fall harder. Each time they fall, they rise again, proud of the bruise, not ashamed of it. To the casual observer, it looks reckless, but Jordan Peterson sees something deeper. In those moments of danger, he sees the ancient instinct of growth, the need to test limits, to flirt with chaos, to become strong through struggle. His rule captures this truth. Do not bother children when they are skateboarding. It's not really about skateboards. It's about courage, freedom, and the essential role of risk in the development of character. Peterson watched those kids while walking through the University of Toronto campus. They built ramps from scraps, sliding rails on marble edges, crashing, laughing, failing again and again. Nearby, signs read, "No skateboarding." But to Peterson, those signs weren't protecting the kids. They were protecting the adults from their own discomfort with risk, because modern society has become obsessed with safety. We bubble wrap our children, insulate them from hardships, sterilize danger, and then wonder why they grow up anxious and weak. He says, when you interfere with children while they are taking necessary risks, you steal their confidence. Courage, like muscle, is built through resistance. If you remove the resistance, you destroy the strength. Boys, and increasingly girls, are drawn to risk because it's how they learn where their limits are. When they climb too high, they discover fear. When they fall, they discover recovery. Every bruise teaches a lesson that no lecture can. Peterson argues that danger is not the enemy of growth, it's the catalyst. Without risk, there's no courage. Without failure, there's no mastery. And without danger, there's no adventure, only anxiety. He says, we don't make men safe by making them harmless. We make them safe by making them competent. Modern society often confuses protection with goodness. We want to prevent all pain, all fear, all danger, but in doing so, we prevent development itself. Children who are never allowed to risk anything grow into adults afraid of everything. They become timid, resentful, and lost. Because the world is full of danger they were never prepared to face. Peterson warns that overprotection is just another form of control. It's not compassion. It's fear disguised as virtue. And it breeds fragility. This rule isn't only about parenting. It's about culture, a culture that's trying to eliminate risk altogether. Peterson sees it in universities that silence speech to avoid a harm, in workplaces that remove challenge in the name of a comfort, and families that confuse kindness with indulgence. But life itself is dangerous. And meaning comes not from safety, but from overcoming danger voluntarily. He says, you cannot be brave if you're protected from fear. You cannot be strong if you're never tested. The skateboarder rule is a metaphor for the entire human experience. We grow when we face what threatens us. We mature when we fall and rise again. We become moral when we choose risk for the sake of good, not comfort for the sake of safety. Peterson draws a clear line. To mature is to confront chaos willingly. To remain a child forever is to hide from it. He often contrasts the masculine and feminine principles that govern human life. Feminine energy protects, nurtures, shelters. Masculine energy explores, challenges, ventures into the unknown. Both are vital. But when the protective instinct dominates completely, society stagnates. Peterson warns that a culture that only values safety will eventually produce resentment, especially among young men. Because men, by nature, crave challenge. And if they can't find it in noble pursuits, they'll seek it elsewhere, in rebellion, destruction, or withdrawal. When you tell boys that their aggression, competitiveness, and drive are dangerous, you don't make them better. You make them lost, and lost men are far more dangerous than strong ones. Though Peterson doesn't glorify recklessness, he glorifies controlled risk, danger met with discipline, the kind that builds confidence, responsibility, and competence. When children play dangerously, they learn boundaries. When they push limits, they develop judgment. When they face fear, they learn courage. That process can't be replaced by lectures, safe spaces, or parental control. It must be lived. Physically, emotionally, and spiritually. He tells parents, don't protect your children so much that they never learn to protect themselves. Because one day you won't be there. And if they've never faced danger, they won't know how to survive without you. You don't prepare children for life by removing all obstacles. You prepare them by teaching them to climb. Peterson ties this to a deeper philosophical truth. Life's meaning is found on the edge, between order and chaos, safety and danger, comfort and challenge. The skateboarders live at that edge. They fall, they bleed, but they learn. Each fall is a dialogue with chaos, and every rise a small victory of order. That's the human condition in miniature. He warns that when adults destroy those small, harmless forms of danger, they force young people to find bigger, darker ones. If boys can't test courage on skateboards, they might test it with violence or nihilism. If girls can't explore independence safely, they may rebel destructively later. The impulse to test chaos doesn't vanish. It mutates. So don't suppress it. Guide it. Channel it. Channel it. Let your children face small risks now so they're ready for the big ones later. Peterson's rule also speaks to something broader, the decline of resilience. We're surrounded by comfort and convenience, yet plagued by anxiety and fragility, because comfort isn't strength. Strength is forged in friction, meaning doesn't come from avoiding suffering. It comes from facing it voluntarily, courageously, honestly. That's what the skateboarders are doing. They're practicing life, falling, failing, rising again. Peterson's voice grows sharp here. When you see children testing themselves, don't intervene out of fear. They're discovering the balance between danger and ability. They're learning what it means to be alive. Because life, by nature, is dangerous. But the danger is what gives it depth. The goal isn't to make children safe. It's to make them strong enough to face the dangers that can't be eliminated, strong enough to stand upright in a fragile world. So when you see children skateboarding, falling, laughing, daring, pushing the edge of chaos, remember what they're really doing. They're not playing recklessly. They're practicing courage. And the worst thing you can do is stop them from becoming the kind of people who don't need to be stopped. Let them take the jump. Let them scrape their knees. Let them learn that life is dangerous and that they are equal to the danger. Because freedom isn't found in safety. It's found in strength. And the courage to face risk is what turns children into heroes. Rule 12: pet a cat when you encounter one on the street. Life is suffering. It's not a cynical observation. It's a fact. Everyone you know will face loss, illness, disappointment, and pain. And one day you will too. Jordan Peterson begins the final rule not with triumph, but with tenderness. Because this rule, pet a cat when you encounter one on the street, isn't about animals. It's about how to live when suffering becomes unavoidable. It's about finding small moments of grace in a world that can often feel unbearable. When Peterson wrote this chapter, his daughter, Michaela, was suffering from a severe and painful autoimmune disease. By her teenage years, she had undergone multiple joint replacements. Her bones and joints, fragile and inflamed, made even walking an act of courage. For years, Peterson and his wife watched helplessly as doctors failed to find a cure. Their home was filled not with laughter, but with fear, the kind of fear that slowly corrodes your sense of safety in the world. He says, when you love someone deeply and they suffer terribly, you learn what it means to be powerless. And yet, amid that pain, he discovered something quietly profound. On one of his daily walks, Peterson began noticing the cats that wandered near his house. They were ordinary cats, street cats, weaving through fences, resting in sunlit patches on the sidewalk. They didn't care about his worries, his deadlines, or his daughter's illness. They just existed, curious, calm, alive. And for a few seconds, when he stopped to stroke one, something shifted. The weight of tragedy didn't disappear, but it loosened its grip. He felt for just a moment the simple beauty of being. That moment became a metaphor, a reminder that even when life collapses, there are fragments of peace scattered everywhere, if you remember to notice them. Peterson's rule doesn't promise escape from suffering. It invites acceptance and attention, because suffering narrows your vision. When you're in pain, you stop seeing the world. You see only your pain. Your life becomes a tunnel, and everything outside it fades. But if you can look up, even for a second, and notice something good, a patch of sunlight, a kind word, a cat purring softly in the chaos, you remember that not everything is lost. There's still beauty. There's still life. There's still meaning, even in the middle of the storm. Peterson often reminds us that life is not fair, and that pretending it is only deepens our resentment. People die unjustly. Good people suffer. Dreams collapse. And none of it seems to make sense. But meaning doesn't come from avoiding tragedy. It comes from facing it, eyes open, heart steady, and still choosing to live fully. That, he says, is heroism. He writes, when things fall apart, pay attention. Because in those moments, the world reveals its true nature. It's easy to be grateful when life goes well. And it's hard to be grateful when everything breaks. But that's when gratitude matters most. Because noticing a small good, even one, in the midst of darkness, is how you keep your soul from dying. Peterson compares this to standing on the edge of chaos, the same balance he's described throughout the book. Order gives life structure. Chaos gives it depth. Meaning emerges in the space between them, in the act of noticing beauty inside the tragedy. He doesn't mean you should literally pet every cat. It's a metaphor for pausing, for slowing down when life overwhelms you. Because in every tragedy there are moments of reprieve, small, fleeting signs that life still holds goodness if you can be still long enough to see them. It might be a conversation with a friend, a sunset over the city, a piece of music that moves you, or a cat who, for no reason at all, lets you rest your hand on its back. That's what this rule means. When you encounter something good, however small, stop and let it remind you why life is still worth living. Peterson's philosophy reaches its emotional peak here. After 11 rules about order, strength, truth, and responsibility, this final one feels fragile, almost gentle, because at the end of all striving, the human soul doesn't just need discipline, it needs grace. You can carry your burdens, stand tall, tell the truth, face chaos, but without moments of stillness, you'll lose sight of why you do it all. The cat on the street isn't just a distraction. It's life whispering, I'm still here. Peterson reminds us that meaning doesn't erase suffering. It transforms it. It turns pain into purpose, tragedy into endurance, and chaos into understanding. But you can only find that transformation if you pay attention. Because even in the worst moments, there's something trying to break through the darkness. The question is, will you notice it? This rule is, in a sense, the culmination of all the others. It's about presence. Responsibility teaches you to carry the weight of being. Truth teaches you to speak clearly. Courage teaches you to face chaos. And this, Rule 12, teaches you to rest in the beauty that remains, because you can't live only in battle. You need moments of peace, moments that remind you that even though life is suffering, it's also astonishingly beautiful. Peterson ends the book here, not with answers, but with attention. He asks you to look closer, to slow down, to find the sacred in the ordinary. Because the cat in the sunlight, the laughter of a child, the warmth of a friend's hand, these are not distractions from life. They are life. And the act of noticing them is what keeps us human even when everything else falls apart. So when the world feels too heavy, when chaos has you cornered and grief fills the air like smoke, stop. Look around, find one small thing that's good, and let it remind you that beauty still exists. And maybe it's a cat, soft and silent, purring in a patch of light. Pet it. Breathe. Live. Because sometimes that's all the meaning you need to keep going.